right, today we're going to start Unit 4. So we're starting on page 47, and this is going to take up 2 pages. So 47 and 48 is a big 4. And today we are doing Intro to Percents. Okay, so for Intro to Percents, we need a few things. I'm just going to show you what we need first. The first thing we need is our circle. This is our tab, so we're going to cut that out first. The second thing we need is this paper. On the front of it, it says grid/bar model. So we're going to fold this in half. Crease in it, set that aside, and the third thing we need is our practice paper. Alright, so let's get started with our circle. We're just going to cut that out. I'm going to go to page 47. And on page 47, I'm going to glue this in. So for me, 47 is on the right side of my book. So if you've been keeping up with me, that's fantastic. What that means is I'm going to take my dot, I'm going to turn it upside down. I'm going to put glue only on the blank side. Just a little bit of glue. Then I'm going to press it down just like this. So the dotted line lines up with our paper. Press that down. The next thing I'm going to do is that paper that we folded in half that says grid and bar model. We folded it. On the back side of that, we're going to dot, dot, not a lot. Put this in on page 47. And while we're here, let's go ahead and cut our dotted line. So we're cutting on the dotted line until the crease. So it opens up just like that. Last thing we glue in is on 48, and that's our practice sheet. And I'm going to go ahead and number my pages. So I've got 47. 48. And our title on page 47 is Intro to Percents. going to go ahead and get started. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to open up our flap for grid model. Our grid model says the term percent means per 100. So I want you to think about that. Percent. If I break those two syllables up, percent, per means for every, and the word cent means 100. Think about century, that's 100 years. There are 100 cents in a dollar. Cent means 100, so percent means for every 100. So it says rewrite each ratio as a number compared to 100, then shade the grid to represent the ratio. Okay, so the first one they give us is 32 to 50. Well, to get from 50 to 100, I would multiply by 2. So what I do to the bottom, I have to also do to the top. 32 times 2 is 64. So if I want to shade that in, these are 10 by 10 grids. I'm going to shade in 6 vertically. And 4 on the 7th section, or the 7th little line. So that is what 64% looks like. 64 out of 100 are shaded. Okay. Next we have 19/25. To get from 25 to 100, you multiply by 4. So we also multiply 19 by 4. 19 times 4 is 76. So when I shade these in, just like I did before, I'm going to shade in 7. And 6 of the next one. Okay, so that's 76%. Next, we have 7/20. To get from 20 to 100, we multiply by 5. So we multiply 7 by 5. 7 times 5 is 35. So to shade that in, we're going to shade 3 vertically. And 5 in the next row. Okay, very last, left, we have 9/10. To get from 10 to 100, you multiply by 10. What you do on the bottom, you have to do on the top. 9 times 10 is 90. So we're going to shade in 9 vertically. A little bit harder to show up because I used yellow, but you can see that I've shaded in the first 9 vertical I forget what they're called, 10 marks, I think. Okay, so that's the grid model. The bar model is very, very similar. Use the percent bar model to find the missing percent. Okay, so what we're looking at is they want 1/4 shaded in. Well, I know that we have 1/4, and to find a percent, I need that to be out of 100, per 100. So, to get from 4 to 100, I would multiply by 25. So multiply 1 by 25. So that would give me 25 per 100. So my percentage is 25%. Okay, below that, we've got 3/8. So we're shading in 3 out of 8. 3 over 8 equals how many out of 100? To get from 8 to 100, we can't do that evenly, but I know that if I multiply it by 12.5, that would give me 100. So 3 times 12.5 is 37.5, or 37.5. So our percentage is 37.5%. And it is okay to have a decimal percent, and it is okay to have a fraction percent. Next, we've got 7/10. So 7 out of 10 equals how many out of 100? We know we multiply by 10, multiply by 10. That gives me 70 out of 100. So that is 70%. And last on this page, we've got 4/5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 out of 5 equals how many out of 100? To get from 5 to 100, we multiply by 20. So we also multiply 4 by 20. That gives us 80 out of 100, which is 80%. All right. Next page. Says use the 10 by 10 model to show 17%. Well, if this is 10 out of a 10 by 10, that means there are 100. We know that per cent means for every 100 so 17% means for every 100, 17 would be shaded. So we're going to shade in this first line and 7 out of the next line. The next says use the 10 by 10 model to represent a model of 640 out of 800. Well, I need to know, what am I going to do to get this to be 100? Well, to get from 800 to 100, we would divide by 8. What we do on the bottom, we have to do on the top. 640 divided by 8 is 80. So each one of these boxes actually represents 8 because that's what we had to divide by. And we're going to shade in 80 out of the 100 boxes. All right. Mr. Garner has 400 acres of land. 80 of those acres are covered with apple trees. Model the percent that is covered in apple trees. Okay, so 80 out of the 400 are covered in apple trees. Since this is a 10 by 10, we want to know how many out of 100 are covered in apple trees. To get from 400 to 100, we divide by 4. What we do in the bottom, we have to do on the top. 80 divided by 4 is 20. So I know that we need to shade in 20%. So we would shade in our first 2 rows. Mr. Eastham owns 200 acres of land. 60 of the acres have corn growing. 45% on them. 45% of the field has cucumbers growing. The rest of the land is being used for growing soybeans. Use the model to find the percentage of land being used for soybeans. Okay, so let's start out with what we know. What I know right now is that 45% of the field has cucumbers. So I'm going to shade in 45 out of the 100. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. Okay. So all of this is cucumbers. The other thing we know is that 60 of the acres have corn growing. Okay, so 60 out of the 200 acres has corn. And I need to know how many out of 100. So I'm going to divide by 2 and divide by 2. And that means that 30% is corn. So I'm going to shade in these 5. And 10 more would make 15. 10 more would make 25. And 5 more. Then it says the rest of the land is being used for growing soybeans. So the rest is right here. 5 plus 10 is 15, plus 10 is 25. So 25% equals soybeans. Okay, and that wraps us up for Intro to Percents.